true. We are. Well, we are in week 4 of a series. This is the Untethered Soul. And we are going to wrap it up next week, but that's just a function of time and space. We are always going to be untethered. We're always going to be living in the heart of God. But we will move on from this topic. And we'll be looping back to it, of course, because there's only one message, and it's been said in 1,000,000,000 different ways, but there's just really one message. There's only one reality, despite the apparent multitude and diversity of appearances and experiences in our reality that we call the human life. But there's really only one thing going on, and that is the what we say every Sunday, the one presence, the one power, the one life, the one love. That's the only reality, and everything else is an appearance that arises from that infinite nature, that infinite truth, that state of being out of which all of us find life and love and wholeness and peace. So we just look for, as ministers, we just look for creative ways of expressing that, and all of the authors who've written millions of books on the topic, they could have just said, there's this one thing, and stopped right there. But we probably wouldn't buy the book, so. Because our butt would get in the way, wouldn't it? Yeah, but what do you mean there's only one thing going on? What about this? What about that? So this book actually sort of takes kind of a comical look at this idea, and sort of poking fun at our human experience, and particularly the way the discursive mind plays out in our human experience, in which it's always sort of narrating. You know, there's what's happening, and that's reality, and then there's the reporter on the scene, which is our mind, or the voice in our head, which is constantly sort of commenting on what's happening, and not only what's happening, but what seems to be happening, and what seems to be happening means, and what that means for us, and whether that represents any kind of a thing to be concerned about. And so life then becomes in the strictly human perception, life becomes a matter of going towards what we want, yes, that's called desire, and pushing away those things that we don't want. That's aversion. So between the poles of desire and aversion, there is still only one thing going on, and it has no desire, and it has no aversion, because it's omnipotent, it's all-knowing. Nothing is missing in the reality of our being. And so that tape that runs all the time in our heads is sort of it's like a great magician who, through a sleight of hand, can get you to see something that isn't really there, or to make something seemingly disappear. And we are convinced by the appearances of life more readily than that which is actually true. And so, well, there you go. There was an appearance of sound. I don't think it actually happened, actually. So I'm looping back because I think it's so important that we realize that the primary message of any truth talk that's worth its salt is to remind us of who and what we truly are. Because, are you guys playing with me?
I'm playing with myself.
Let's have a musical interlude for the talk today and keep it going, yes. Anyway, so who am I? It's just a really good question to get up with every morning. Who am I? And not to be satisfied with the superficial mind answers, because that's not what we're interested in. we've been duped enough by the mind that thinks that we are this human flesh, and that's all there is to it. And that perception of ourself has got us usually on red alert all the time. We're always trying to protect it. And we do need to protect our bodies because, hey, we are spiritual beings, but these bodies are vulnerable. So we do need to take care of that. But most of our fears are not rooted in actual physical dangers. That might have been true, way back in the early prehistoric times when there was no real safety on the earth, and we didn't have the shelter or the ways of protecting ourselves that we have today, and we don't have wild saber-toothed tigers roaming in your neighborhood, most likely. I hope you don't, anyway. If you do, make sure you get your camera out. It'll be on. You can get it on Instagram, so we can all see it. But so most of the fears, most of the stuff that has us sort of, reacting to life and worrying about what's going to happen to us is not rooted in actual dangers or actual fears, but they're fears that we have that something is going to happen to us that is going to, in some way, limit our happiness or our well-being. Because we all want to be happy, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, because where do you think that comes from, that we want to be happy? Our essence, yeah. Who, what, and what we are is happy, joy, love, peace, all that good stuff. And it isn't that we're just sort of trying to candy coat life in order to be happy. We're actually trying to evoke and bring forth into recognition and realization the happiness that is essential to us. That's why we have a desire for happiness. It isn't superficial. I mean, there can be a superficial kind of happiness, and that can come from the ego, that can come from the sense of a separate self, where we're just looking to sort of entertain ourselves and distract ourselves. But there is a legitimate, deep desire you and I have, and it comes from who and what we are, to be happy, to be joyful, and to have peace of mind, and to feel content with life. And I don't mean life out here, but I mean the life that we are, the being that we are, without anything needing to be different. But that's not our experience, is it? Most of the time. Most of the time we're finding ourselves trying to navigate life, and maybe sort of we're on a remodeling project for our life. And maybe we're even trying to remodel the people in our life. Anyone know that one? Yeah, if she would just do this, if he would just be that way, then I would be happier. Yeah. Right? And we're trying to work from outside in, right? I mean, we could just say it, it's okay. I mean, that's the way the dualistic egoic mind works, is there's me and then there's you, and there's this world out there, and then there's just me inside here. We think there's this little separate person that has to get life to be a certain way so that I'll be okay. And that seems to preoccupy most of what the mind does all day long. How can I be happier? How can I get what I want? How can I avoid what I don't want? And that sort of discursive mind it will wear us out. And I'm going to read this quote again, and I'm going to add a little bit more to it, because I think it's comical, but it's also very, very true. So he starts, and I don't have the page number, I'm sorry, but I'm sure you'll find it. If you mistreat an animal, it becomes afraid. And this is what happened to your psyche, yeah? You've mistreated it by giving it a responsibility that is incomprehensible. Just stop for a moment and see what you have given your mind to do. You said to your mind, I want everyone to like me. I don't want anyone to speak badly of me. I want everything I say and do to be acceptable and pleasing to everyone. I don't want anyone to hurt me. I don't want anything to happen that I don't like. And I want everything to happen that I do like. You guys are with me? No, there's nothing wrong with this, right? Then you said, now, mind, figure out how to make every one of these things a reality, even if you have to think about it day and night. And the mind said, I'm on the job. I will work on it constantly, right? And that's what is happening most of the time. Unless maybe you're in a really cool meditation, or you find yourself able to quiet that mind of ours. But most of the time, the mind is doing its job to sort of protect you from things that that you don't like, and bring into your reality things that you do. So it goes on to say, can you imagine somebody actually trying to do that? I mean, that would be a job description, setting up someone to fail, or exhaustion, right? Burnout, all these things we can think of. The mind has to try to make it so that everything you say is said the right way, taken the right way, and has the right effect on everybody. It has to make sure that everything you do is interpreted and seen the right way, and that nobody does anything that hurts you. It has to make sure that you get everything you want, and you don't ever get what you don't want. The mind is constantly trying to give you advice about how to make it all okay. Yes? That is why the mind is so active. You gave it an impossible task to do. This is what has broken the psyche. The signs of the body breaking are pain and weakness. The signs of the psyche breaking are underlying fear and incessant neurotic thought. Yes? And it is a little neurotic, isn't it? I mean, if you catch yourself, you end up sort of having these inner dialogues where you respond, you have a thought, and then you respond to the thought, and then that responds like, who are these little people inside of my head that are having this dialogue, right? It's absurd if we actually observe it. And that is what probably the first step of any kind of growth, psychological growth, spiritual growth, is you become aware. Just stepping back just for a moment, instead of just letting that chatter just go on unbridled and unnoticed, is you begin to hear it. And then you begin to inquire as to, what is that voice? What is that voice? And then, what is hearing that voice? And that's where you'll find the gold. That of you which is aware of the voice in your head is who and what you truly are. Not the voice which portends to be you, but you that is aware of the chatter, you that is aware of all of your senses, of the sounds that you hear, of the sights that you behold with your eyes. That which is aware, that which takes in the data of what really is happening, that's you. And that's what we're seeking to return to that awareness, to live from that being, to live from that clear, pure mind that knows things as they are, not as we imagine them to be or afraid that they are. Does this make sense? Worth saying again? Okay. So there is a way out, and the more we sit in this seat of witness consciousness, that place of awareness, where you're not just aware of objects, because that's the dualistic notion. I'm aware, and I'm aware there's a person here. I'm aware that I'm in a room, and I'm aware of all these objects, and I'm aware of this thing and that thing. But what about the awareness itself? Do we ever just notice that we have this capacity to have an experience, which is awareness itself? It's like when we look at a movie, we don't see the screen, even though we're looking right at it, right? But we turn off the TV, or the movie stops, and there's nothing on the screen, then we notice the screen. So that's sort of this practice, is that we sort of turn off or turn away from the objects of our perception, of everything that we're observing in our life, and we begin to become aware of awareness itself. And that's what he calls the seat of witness consciousness. And he said, the more you realize that you are completely independent of what you are watching, there must be a way to break free of the magical hold that the psyche has on your awareness, and there must be a way out. There's a metaphor that he uses in here that if you have a dog and you don't have a fence around your property, you can install what they call an invisible fence, where you bury a wire around the perimeter of your property where you do not want your dog to get out from. And even though there's nothing visible there, if the dog crosses, crosses that line, it gets a little mild jolt, vibration. And it's an unpleasant experience, and so the dog retreats. And so after a while, the dog learns, after having tested all of the perimeter of your property, that no matter where he goes or tries to go beyond that perimeter, he is going to be turned back, or he thinks that he's going to be turned back, or at least he decides that that's not a line that he wants to cross anymore. And then he doesn't even really need to test that experience anymore. He now has it in his psyche, he has it in his brain or in his mind, that this is the limit, this is the safe limit, right? And so the difference is, though, if you try this with a really big dog, strong, powerful dog, they will not be deterred. They will discover that they can cross that line, and yes, it will be uncomfortable, but they will be able to get on the other side, and they will not die, and they will not even be harmed. Yes, there will be discomfort, but the price of freedom is that discomfort. And this is what we are up against, is when we come up against those things that we are afraid of in our life, those little phobias that we have, those places that we are resistant to go through because they're uncomfortable, we don't realize that by retreating from that discomfort, we are costing ourselves the freedom, the liberation, the possibilities of an unbridled life that lies on the other side of those apparent barriers that are discomfort, but they really represent portals to a greater life. So this is what we're up against. Are we willing to go through a little bit of discomfort? Maybe it's more than a little sometimes, because there are the big ones, right? Things that we have developed, throughout our life, where, beliefs that we have about ourselves. Maybe we were told that, we weren't lovable, or we thought we weren't lovable, and we have to risk going into a relationship where we might be rejected. Yes. But if we keep retreating from that imaginary notion that we're not lovable, in other words, we're not even going to test it, we are not going to be able to enter into the possibility of having a loving relationship if we keep retreating from the imagined self that says, I'm not lovable and I don't want to be uncomfortable. So I'll stay here bereft of the very thing that my soul is wanting to experience so that I'm not humanly uncomfortable. It's a very steep price to pay. Is it worth it? This is what we have to ask ourselves. And you have to be ready. We're not always ready to be that courageous, right? That kind of spiritual bravado doesn't come, just because we intend it. It may take a lot of attempts, running at the edge or the boundary of our beliefs or our fears or our shadowy thoughts before we finally get the gumption to be able to withstand the discomfort and then find that we do not die, that our worst fears do not come upon us, and that we find ourselves open to the possibility of something good and something great and something true, taking the place of the discomfort that had stopped us from going across that imagined boundary before. I want to share a story with you, and then we're going to go into a meditation. So, a number of years ago, we were in Maui, Denise and I, and we're staying at this resort. And let me just back up for a moment and say, I have had a lifelong fascination with underwater. I think going back to show you how old I am, to the Lloyd Bridges sea hunt days. Oh my God. And the Jacques Cousteau, I was fascinated by underwater, and I wanted to scuba dive. And then what existed along with that was a deep fear of drowning. So, you know, you get this, right? So there's a push and a pull. There's a pull towards wanting to scuba dive and explore the bottom of the ocean and see the turtles and the fish and the coral and all the beauty, and that's otherworldly kind of experience. But the fear of drowning, because I had a near drowning experience when I was a little boy. I didn't drown though, I guess you know that. But I came close, you know. It was very traumatic. Anyway, so we're in Maui, so we're at this hotel, and we're down by the pool, and there's a sign that says, scuba clinic this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Learn in the pool, and then if you want to, go out in the ocean. And so I said to Denise, I said, you know, I think I'm going to do that. I've always wanted to do it. And I'm going to do it in the pool, and you know, I'll get used to it, and maybe I can do it. And she said, well, if you're going to do it, I'm going to do it, because I know scuba diving takes you to beautiful places, and I don't want to be left behind. So we did it together. So we gather around the pool, and they said, and this guy, who's the instructor, he talks like this. He says, my name is Adi, I'm from New York. I'm going to teach you how to scuba dive. And I'm like, this is not squaring with what I'm thinking. He sounds like a New York cab driver, right? So in my mind is just making up a whole story about this guy's not qualified. If he sounds like a cab driver, maybe he is a cab driver, and maybe he's reckless. You know, he's going to take us under the water. I don't think so. So my mind already was looking for reasons to get out of this thing, right? But I'm there, and I paid my money, you know, so we stick there. He says, so what you're going to do, we're going to put the equipment on, you know, we're going to show you how to breathe, and then we're going to put you under the water. You're going to swim around a few times, and if you're comfortable, then we're going to go out to the ocean. It's going to be great. So get the equipment on, the regulator, right, for your mouth. And he says, I just want you to put your face in the water. Just put your face down in the water. You don't have to swim, just put your face down in the water like this. I said, I can do that. We put the face down in the water. And he started showing us all the equipment and how everything works. And he goes, and there's an inflation vest. He says, you think you want to come up? He says, you push the button, you float to the top. I go, man, I'm down with that. You know, that's going to be my ace in the hole. So I swim around on the surface. And he goes, okay, now I want you to go down under the water. So I go down under the water, and funny thing, on the surface, I'm fine. And he had told us, he said, you know, you're not going to get a lot of air. It's going to feel like you're not getting a lot of air, but it's enough. You got to know you're getting enough air. Just don't worry about it. So on the top, I'm swimming around going, yeah, it's not very much air, but it's enough. And as soon as I dove down to the bottom of the pool, I'm like, you see what's happened? Now the same breathing apparatus is now not giving me enough oxygen because I'm responding to what? Fear. To fear. And my breathing is, you know, is more rapid because I'm more desperate, and I'm seeing a reality that's not there. There's not any less air coming to me. In other words, the presence and the power and the love of God is never diminished in our experience, but we can imagine in our mind that this is not going to be okay. So I come up and I tell him, I said, you know, I didn't feel like I had enough air down there. He said, you know, whether you're on the top or you're on the bottom, you got the same amount of air. So suddenly he's becoming a, you know, a bodhisattva. He's becoming very wise. He's like, okay, all right, I like that. So he said, just take a couple of more laps, and then if you want to join us, you can join us. So we take like 3 or 4 more laps around the pool, and I come out again, I'm ready to go. So we go out to the ocean, and he takes us out about 100 yards, and past like 3 or 4 buoys, out there. He says, we're going to go down about 20 feet, and you're going to see turtles, you're going to see beautiful fish. He says, it's going to be amazing. So I'm excited, and Denise is excited. So we dive down, and I go down right away, and I find turtles down there, and this beautiful coral. And I'm like, this is exactly what I imagined. This is what I've wanted to do my whole life. I can't believe I'm 60-some years old, and I'm finally getting around to doing this. And I'm just elated. And I look around, and I look for Denise, and I see Denise, and she's going like this. She's got like she wants to come up, So the instructor sees her as well. And he can look in her eyes, and he can see the fear in her eyes. And so here's this guy that I've been, criticizing. He goes to her, and this is, of course, it's silent. There's no conversation. But he goes to her, and he gently takes her by the hand, and looks, and he looks her in the eye, and he does this, and he guides her ever so slowly, just a little bit deeper into the water. We want to back up. And he knows that what she's looking for is to feel the joy of moving through a fear and to experience this new world that's on the other side of that fear. If she can just, move through the discomfort. And so he takes her by the hand and just gently takes her down to the bottom until her breathing normalizes and returns. And when she's done that, then suddenly this world opens up to her. The same amazing experience that I was having, she's now having. She just had to go through that period where she was reacting to the appearance that there wasn't enough oxygen and not enough air for her. And she wanted to retreat. But in retreating, she would have deprived herself of this amazing experience. So this guy that I'm making fun of is like a master teacher, right? And that's what we can do for each other. Those of us who have gone farther than our fellow brother or sister in some period of life or some facet of life, and that could be going through a disease, it could go through going through cancer, or going through a divorce, or going through bankruptcy. We can be the people who know that there is life after bankruptcy, and there's life after divorce, and there's life after cancer. Yes? And that's really what we're invited to do, to find those allies in our life. And of course we have an inner ally all the time, but sometimes it does help to have someone who's actually walked that path, to take your hand and gently encourage you to move through that discomfort so that you can discover what they have discovered, that there is liberation. We don't have to live within the restraints of our fears. Does this make sense? Yeah. So let's consider that this week as we enter into our life. And it isn't to say you're going to take on that number 10 fear. That would not be a wise way to develop this internal sense of strength and ability to move through discomfort. Take the little things in life, I don't know what that is for you, but you do. And just see if you can't just sit in that place of discomfort, even if it's, I don't know, some people, if you're really shy, this would be like, and I used to be a huge introvert. I didn't look at anybody, I didn't talk to anybody. I'm not that way anymore, but for me, just to look at somebody as I was passing them, like in a store, just to make eye contact with them, and I thought I was going to die, Like they would see something in me and reject me. So that's, that's my little bugaboo. That's my little thing that I grew up with. But you begin to do that, and you realize you don't die. And you might feel a little discomfort, but the more you do it, the less discomfort you feel, until one day you realize that you just do it naturally because that's who you are. And a whole world of possibilities.
What you see is your fear that they see you as not being good enough.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, and we all have a story that's behind that aversion that we have of certain situations and situations. But we're not here to babysit our fears. We're here to see through them. If we are here to grow, if we're here to experience what life can be and its full possibilities, then we've got to come up against those fears, and we have to work our way through them to see what they are, because they're nothing but thoughts. There's nothing to them. They can feel like walls, yeah? But they're just made out of the psyche, and the psyche is nothing. It's just made of thoughts and feelings. And thoughts and feelings, as we have shown in previous weeks, can be observed. And what can be observed can't be who you are. Thoughts come and thoughts go, but you don't. So can we confront those things which come and go and see them for the wispy, ephemeral aspects of appearance, rather than solid blocks to our forward progress in life? That's the question, and how we answer that determines how we evolve. Yes? Good. So let's take this inside, because it's always best to internalize what we've listened to with our minds and allow our hearts to deepen this experience. So take a breath and let it go. First of all, let's give thanks. Gratitude is a great way to open the heart. So we give thanks that life is not a fixed reality. That life is a function of our perception and how we experience the situations and the circumstances and the people in our life are colored by our perceptions. And that those perceptions can be changed, can be evolved. They can be seen as perceptions. We can realize that how we see things determines our experience, but how we see things is not fixed. It can shift as we awaken to the truth of our being, as we become more aware of our true infinite nature, which can never be limited, which can never be harmed, which can never be diminished or delayed or obstructed. Then we find the courage and the means to move through these places in us that seem stuck or blocked by fear or apparent limitations to the possibilities in our life. And we ask the Spirit of Truth, which is within us, to be like the dive instructor that takes us gently by the hand and moves us into the deeper truth of our nature, where we find the capacity, where we find the sense of wholeness and well-being and strength and well-being that allows us to be in uncomfortable situations and not be diminished. And therein discover that we are more than the sum of our fears. That fear is only false evidence appearing real, but it has no actual reality. So this week I invite you to consider this path of confronting the discomfort on the way to liberation, and to find whatever assistance and allies and inspiration can take your reluctance and dissolve it in a faith that allows you to go deeper and farther into the realization of the possibilities for fully expressing this life that you have right here in this body at this time. No matter your age, it's never too late to experience more of the fullness of life. This can be done from a seated position without moving anywhere, because it's primarily the journey of the mind and the heart. And we know that the master teachers have all emboldened us and encouraged us and empowered us to take this journey, saying that these things that I have done, so shall you. Because we are made of the same thing. We are spiritual beings without limits. So we give thanks for the presence and the power, the omnipotence of Spirit, which is us, expressing in this body at this time, to bear witness to the greater truth that life has no limits other than those that we impose upon it, and continue to believe in. But these limits can be tested, and in the testing we will find what they are made of and what they are not made of. And it will be the portal to our new freedom. May this be our experience as it is our reality. So be it. Amen.